Just 1 minute, everyone.
Good, whenever you are.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Ametta, Chair of the Statutory Public Meeting. Before continuing, we will now rise from closed session. May I please have the mover read the motion in its entirety?
Thank you, Chair
Councillor
Ametta.
Hamilton?
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Thank you, Chair Ametta, and through you. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Roberts. The recommendation, the Council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session at 6:36 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor. We will call the vote.
Opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries.
Thank you. During the closed session, discussions occurred with council and staff related to confidential legal advice and confidential negotiations. Before I begin, I would like to provide you with a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the council chambers using the nearest exit staircase. If you require assistance, please see our clerk staff for further assistance, and I ask that you please gather outside of City Hall in the Farmers Market parking lot and await further instructions. As a reminder, City of Cambridge Council meetings are broadcasted on the City of Cambridge YouTube page and archived on the city's website. On that note, we had 193 views on YouTube and 6 delegates during our last statutory public meeting. Please note that we have rules of engagement at council and committee meetings. I ask that you be respectful while others are speaking, refrain from any demonstrations, and I encourage you to actively listen to others. We have one statutory public meeting under the Ontario Planning Act. It is my pleasure to introduce council. Councillor Hamilton, Mayor Liggett, Councillor Kimson, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Shawari, Councillor Earnshaw, and Councillor Devine. We embrace our shared responsibility with the First Nations people to take care of this earth and its creatures. We can only do so by walking the path as partners stewarding this land, as we have been given the duty together to live in balance and harmony with all living things. We acknowledge and respect the Anishinaabe, Chinootan, and Haudenosaunee people who came before us and who we live amongst. By honoring this truth of past and present, may we come to true reconciliation through listening, reflecting, and learning. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank everyone for joining us in this meeting. We appreciate your participation as we come together to serve the community. I ask that we create a welcoming and positive environment that for everyone that includes respect, that we listen to each other with care, speak thoughtfully, and engage kindly with one another. Kindness, that we treat everyone, council staff and the public, with respect and understanding. And inclusion, that we embrace diverse perspectives and respect each other's opinions. Together we can make this meeting one where respect, kindness, and inclusion are at the heart of everything we do, that this is a safe space. Behavior that is disrespectful, disruptive, aggressive, or intimidating will result in those individuals being asked to leave. A reminder to members of council that the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act requires members of council to declare any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to a matter under consideration. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, members of council? Seeing none, we will move forward with our agenda. We have one statutory public meeting under the Ontario Planning Act. We will begin our public meeting with any pre-registered delegates, followed by a brief 3-minute call-out period to any member of the virtual audience that wish to speak. Members of our virtual audience wishing to speak to an item before us may contact us at clerks@cambridge.ca to be called into the meeting. Our text number 226-218-1184. City staff are on hand to monitor this number and email address during the course of the statutory public meeting. Please note that the number is also available on the city website, our agenda, and on the live stream of our meeting located on the City of Cambridge YouTube page. Each delegate who participates will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. I remind members of council and the public that there is no debate of the item in the public meeting. I will then call upon staff to provide a presentation. I also remind council that the statutory public meeting item will be before council a second time with the recommendation report. This process is for public consultation. Council will consider all oral and written comments prior to making a decision on a planning matter. Our only statutory public meeting is agenda number 7.1, report 25-015 PG Hesper Heritage Conservation District Plan public meeting. We will hear from the pre-registered delegates, followed by anyone else who wishes to speak to the item. And we have one pre-registered delegation for this public meeting, Vanessa Hicks, MHBC.
She's in the room. She just needs to unmute.
We just need you to unmute.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm following on YouTube, and I'm a little bit unused to doing it this way, but please let me know if you can see my presentation in front of you. I submitted some PowerPoint slides in advance.
Sorry, hi Vanessa, could you turn off the YouTube? There's a bit of a delay.
Thank you. I've closed to that.
Thank you.
Just let me know when you're ready for me.
We are, you may begin.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Chair Armida and members of council. My name is Vanessa Hicks, and I am a heritage planner with MHBC Planning, and I'm here today to provide you with some comments on the draft Heritage Conservation District Plan as it relates to the property at 241 Queen Street West. And before I begin, I would just like to thank you for this opportunity to speak, and also to very much thank staff, the city's cultural heritage staff, for involving us in this process, and I look forward to continuing to work with them. So my first slide, as an introduction to 241 Queen Street West, our staff have reviewed the Heritage Conservation District study document and the draft Heritage Conservation District plan, and we've been very involved in the study over the last year. And ultimately, after our review, we've determined that the inclusion of the property at 241 Queen Street West has not been justified. And I'll provide some more information to you of our review. The property is an 11.7 acre vacant lot. It's currently not listed or designated, and it is located at the edge of the recommended Heritage Conservation District boundary. And on slide 3 of my presentation, you can see maps outlining the location of this property in the former industrial character area. Next slide, on slide 4. You can see an aerial photograph of the property at 241 Queen Street West, noting its location and also that it is currently vacant. So moving along on slide 5, I'll provide a review of our 2 main points on the Heritage Conservation District boundary and the recommendations that are before you. So ultimately, we've concluded that the property at 241 Queen Street West has not been justified for inclusion in the Heritage Conservation District boundary. Now, the boundary was ultimately identified through the character of the area and the identified heritage attributes. And we've reviewed the evaluation of this property, which was completed by the consultants. And ultimately, we're of the opinion that the evaluation does not demonstrate why the property is of heritage value. We've requested further information on this evaluation, and to date, ultimately, we've received no further information. So we're still looking for this from staff and the consultant and hoping we can work on this together. The subject property also does not include any built heritage fabric. As I said, it's currently vacant, and therefore no policies or guidelines of any Heritage Conservation District plan regarding building conservation would apply to the property. Lastly, the subject property is currently adjacent to a Part 4 designated property at 215 Queen Street West. So ultimately, regardless of whether or not this property is included or excluded in the HCD boundary, and even if the Heritage Conservation District never comes to fruition, any future development of this property at 241 Queen Street West would already require that it be evaluated by a heritage impact assessment. So moving on to my next main point on slide 6 of my presentation. We have reviewed the Heritage Conservation District draft plan and did a very thorough review of its heritage character and heritage features. And again, because the property is vacant, it actually doesn't include any of the heritage attributes that are listed and clearly identified in the district plan. So given the definitions of what is contributing and non-contributing the Heritage Conservation District plan, generally those properties that are contributing to the Heritage Conservation District include heritage resources and are of heritage value. So because this property is vacant, we're of the opinion that it really doesn't fit into the district plan's definition of contributing, and it should be identified as non-contributing. We've also identified that there are actually other vacant properties in the Heritage Conservation District boundary, which are also in close proximity of the river and are also identified as non-contributing. So whereas there are other properties in the district that are close to the river and are also vacant, this property has been identified as contributing, whereas these other ones of similar characteristics have been identified as non-contributing. So we're looking for further information regarding the different treatment and differentiation between these vacant properties in the Heritage Conservation District. So ultimately, we have identified that there has been no justification for inclusion of 241 Queen Street West in the Heritage Conservation District boundary, and the subject property is vacant and does not include any of the heritage resources or features that were identified in the district plan and should be considered for exclusion from the boundary. And I'd like to point out that because this property, like I said, is located at the periphery or the edge of the boundary, it could be considered for exclusion from the boundary without compromising the integrity of the boundary, or sorry, the integrity of the district as a whole. So those are my main points. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members of council? Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you very much, Chair Mehta. I'm just flipping through here on page 6 of the slides. Thank you, Vanessa, for your presentation. On page 6 of the slides, you noted that you have requested further information on the evaluation, but you've not yet been provided with it. Can you elaborate on what information you've asked for?
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. So the consultants completed an evaluation of every single property within the study area. Now, the evaluation that we were provided for this particular property at 241 Queen Street West is essentially a one-pager, and it says that the property is of contextual value, but it's extremely brief. So we have I identified that this is brief, and we would like further information to justify why they have said it has value, but to date, we have not been provided any further information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Mena, and through you. And thank you very much for your presentation. My question just had to do with including any built heritage fabric. Can you confirm, is there any built fabric on this property at all? And is it heritage or is it simply vacant?
Through the chair, thank you very much for your question. The property at 241 Queen Street West is completely vacant and includes no built features.
Thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you to the chair. 240 Queen Street, 241 Queen Street, if you're not familiar with it, is the old mill, okay? And currently, the property that's being discussed, there is no buildings on it, but there was a building on it. Many, many years ago, because the mill was 1/3 larger than it is today. Lo and behold, there was a fire in the 80s. They saved 2/3 of the building, and where the end of that building is today, the building was another 1/3 longer. So there was heritage distinction there. Now at this point in time, clearly we'd have to go have a walk and have a look and see what's there. But from the end of the current building to the end of that property, there are no buildings at this point. There are no buildings. And the next building down the way is the region waste treatment plant. Now there could be some, I don't know, some strange butterflies in there, something we don't know about. I don't know anything about that, but that's the history. So just to say there's no building on it, that's fine. Today, there is no building, but there was. And it was very substantial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Did you have a question?
Oh, I don't have a question. I was just giving clarification of what was said, Mr. Chair.
The chair appreciates that. I was
Thank you.
just checking. All right. Are there any other questions? See none. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your time.
Have a good evening. I will now call upon additional members of the public who would like to speak to item number 7.1, Report 25-015 PG Hesper Heritage Conservation District Plan Public Meeting. Please text the number 226-218-1184 or email clerks@cambridge.ca. And during the break, our clerk will advise if we receive any requests to speak virtually. We're taking a 3-minute break, but I may allow a little bit more, so. Well, welcome back, everyone. And we've received no requests for additional delegations. We're good. Staff have confirmed that. So a reminder to anyone interested in this item, you may submit written correspondence on the matter for inclusion in the minutes if you are unable to delegate. And I have received confirmation from staff that there are no further requests to speak. We now have a presentation from Jeremy Parsons, Senior Planner, Heritage and Trace Architects, or sorry, Trace Architectures. Welcome. Sorry, Councilor Devine, are you good? Okay. Okay, just 1 minute.
Okay, if you just indulge me for a minute, if you don't mind, please. That's the building we were just talking about, the old mill in Hesper. That building, and there's still a third of that foundation still in the ground, I'm sure. That building is nationally recognized by the federal government. Okay, I don't know if people realize that here, but that building is nationally recognized by the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. Okay. Well, good evening, councilors, mayor, staff, and members of the public, and welcome to the statutory public meeting for the Hespeler Heritage Conservation District Plan. My name is Jeremy Parsons. I'm a senior heritage planner here at the City of Cambridge and the project manager for this project. Also joining me today virtually is Emily Guy and Chris Warden from Trace Architectures, and also Melissa Aldunate and Nick Borchescu here from Policy Planning. And we'll do next slide, please. Oh, am I in charge? Sorry. Let's try that. There we go. All right, so this is an overview of the presentation. So staff will provide a background and context of the district and just introduce the project. And then Emily from Trace will provide highlights of the draft plan, some examples of different policies and guidelines in the draft plan, some visual aids, which are interesting to see within the draft plan, and finally some next steps on the project. Next slide, please. Oh, here we go. I'm so used to this. Okay, it's important to note that there's two main phases or stages within heritage conservation districts in Ontario. The study phase, or phase 1, and the plan phase, or phase 2. The study phase was launched in 2023 at the direction of Council and included consultation with MHAC, research on property value and assessment for each property, delineation of boundaries for the study, and a series of public engagement opportunities, including open houses, focus group meetings with local residents in Hespeler, and a survey. In June of 2024, Council approved the study area boundaries, which are what you will see today, and approve the launch of phase 2. So this is where we're at in the project, phase 2, the plan phase. This has involved the drafting of detailed policies and guidelines for the district, preparation of the HCD plan document, and it's also involved a significant amount of public engagement throughout. So we've continued with our focus group meetings, open houses, MHAC meetings, website updates, postal mailouts to all of our residents, newspaper publications, social media posts, and notices on the city's website. So following this meeting, we intend to launch a second survey on the draft plan, present the plan to MHAC, and host a final open house on October 29th at the Legion. The final steps will be to bring the plan to Council in Q1 2026. Should the plan be formalized for approval, the bylaw will be passed and registered on title through that process, and following this, any necessary amendments to existing bylaws or to the official plan will be identified for future action. The HCD will then be in force and effect. And in accordance with Section 41 of the Heritage Act, a public meeting is required before adopting the designation bylaw for an HCD. Notice of this meeting was provided on the city's website and also to property owners within the district. Oral and written submissions are both welcome at the meeting, and copies of the plan are available on the project website. All right, and over to you, Emily, from Trace for the rest of the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeremy. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for facilitating this presentation to you. If you notice me, look, I have two screens going, so I can have you on one screen and my presentation on the other screen. So if I'm moving back and forth, I apologize just for the time being. So my name is Emily Guy. I'm the Research and Policy Lead at Trace, and I'm here with my colleague, Chris Warden, who's the Senior Conservation Architect here at Trace. So together, we'll be presenting the draft Hespeler Heritage Conservation District Planning Guidelines for you this evening. And we'll walk you through the background briefly of this project, highlight the key elements of this plan's framework, and explain how the policies and the guidelines are intended to work. So we'll also share examples and visual aids to help illustrate the plan in practice before finishing with the next steps in the process. Okay, so our objectives. So this plan is guided by 5 core objectives. Conserving Hespeler's heritage character, and this includes both its buildings and its landscapes. It also involves the stewardship of natural heritage features such as the Speed River. It's about managing built heritage so existing properties are conserved and new development is sensitive to context. And it's about enhancing the public realm from streetscapes to parks to open spaces. And last but certainly not least, it's about fostering public engagement, ensuring the community is an active partner in conserving and shaping this district. So next slide, please. Yeah, on the next series of slides, we'll walk through the framework of the plan briefly and the rationale for our approach. So this district boundary includes more than 300 properties, includes the Chilligo Conservation Area as well. It was drawn not only to capture historic buildings, but also include open spaces, natural features, and even vacant or contemporary sites where future change should be carefully managed. So to achieve this plan is organized into 2 levels: whole district policies and guidelines, and character zone policies and guidelines. So whole district policies address what ties everything together: the Speed River, the views, the public realm, and the overall setting of the district. Character zone policies recognize that different areas in the entire district, so the commercial core, the residential areas, the former industrial sites, each have distinct forms, materials, histories. And this allows guidance to be more precise and context sensitive rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. So you'll see here in our heritage conservation or heritage character zone, we've outlined in different colors, and you'll see this applies to the sections of the plan as well. So the goal here was a structure to make the plan both comprehensive but also adaptable. It protects the shared character of the district while responding to the diversity within it. So next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so an important distinction in the plan is between the policies and the guidelines. Policies are the city's official direction. They're legally binding under the Ontario Heritage Act, and they're used by council and staff when making decisions about things like demolitions, major alterations, or new development. Guidelines, on the other hand, are practical tools for owners, for architects, for the municipality, for builders, and they provide advice on how to plan projects that respect the district's character and policies, things like windows, paint colors, additions. But guidelines are flexible. They're meant to encourage good design rather than prescribe a single solution. So in this case, they're not intended to be exhaustive. They are guidelines that help apply the policies. So policies and guidelines cover a wide range of aspects, and we'll explore some very brief examples of these shortly. So next slide, please. But first, it's important to discuss contributing and non-contributing properties. So every property within the boundary is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. But not every property will necessarily make the same contribution to the district's character. So that's why properties are classified as either contributing or non-contributing. Contributing properties directly reflect a district's cultural heritage value through perhaps their architecture, history, their relationship to the Speed River as examples. They also meet at least 2 of the 9 criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act. Non-contributing properties may also still be older properties, landscapes, they may be newer or altered, and they're still very much part of the district and subject to their own set of policies and guidelines in this plan that keep them compatible with the broader context. So these properties meet 1 or less criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act. So in the case of contributing properties, conservation is stricter because these buildings or landscapes embody the district's heritage values. For non-contributing properties, the focus is on integration, making sure new work fits with the street scale, for example, the rhythm, the materials. So while the properties may not necessarily be historic per se themselves, they still shape and can contribute to the overall character, especially moving forward. So the strong majority of properties in the Hespeler HCD are contributing for many different reasons. It's really important to stress that the heritage value of the district doesn't come from one single landmark, it comes from the grouping. The streets, the buildings, the views, and the way that everything works together. This is also what makes district designation different from an individual designation. An individual designation protects the attributes of a single place. A district designation, by contrast, recognizes the character of the neighborhood as a whole. So that's why, while the plan sets different expectations, contributing and non-contributing, the focus is always on the district's protection and the overall goal to balance preservation with flexibility, allowing for growth and adaptation without undermining the heritage character. For this reason, while the Hespeler HCD articulates separate policies for contributing and non-contributing properties in each character zone, the plan begins with policies and guidelines that apply to the whole district. So they apply to all properties in the HCD, whether they're contributing or non-contributing. They protect elements that tie the district together, including the Speed River, including views, including vistas, the public realm, and the overall setting. Their purpose is to safeguard the collective character and the cultural heritage value that the district shares as a whole. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So to better articulate the difference between policies and guidelines, let's very briefly look at some simplified examples here on the screen. These 2 examples are stripped down policies on new construction and side additions, basically shown to illustrate exactly what we mean by the difference between policies and guidelines. So policies are the binding direction of the plan. They use shall or strong language that's legally enforceable under the Ontario Heritage Act. So they set out clear requirements that city staff and council must follow when making decisions about things like demolition, new construction, or alterations. Policies also make sure that conservation is consistent and predictable across the district and or the character zones. Next slide, please. Guidelines, on the other hand, are more advisory in nature. They use a softer language like should or may and provide more practical design advice. They help property owners, architects, builders understand how to meet the intent of the policies. So, for example, like I said before, an approach to windows, cladding materials, or additions. They do allow for flexibility and creativity, but always within a framework that respects the heritage character of the district. So while policies set the rules that must be followed, guidelines provide the practical advice on how to meet those rules in a way that fits the district's character. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So while HCD plans contain a significant amount of textual guidance, we wanted to make sure this document was also user-friendly to many stakeholders, including the city, including property owners, business owners, and anyone that is affected by this particular document. So to help do that, we wanted to help visualize the policies and guidelines and articulate some clear examples. And the plan includes a series of these illustrations or graphics like you see here on the screen. So these graphics cover new buildings, additions like the policy examples I just presented, but also things like landscape, streetscape, public realm, parks, green spaces, as well as ancillary structures. And the goal is to make the plan more user-friendly so property owners can clearly see what good design looks like in the context, which is what we are showing here in this case, this particular example, as a good example of an addition in terms of location and scale. Next slide, please. So in contrast, we also show, often side by side, discourage changes or concepts that don't meet the policies and guidelines. So in this case, we are showing one that overwhelms the original structure, obscures heritage features, or introduces incompatible forms. And while we're not using these as a way of saying all additions need to look a certain way, the goal is to help illustrate how the policies and guidelines can be applied in practice using a simplified visual example. Next slide, please. So another example of this is this slide image taken from the commercial character zone. And it shows how a mixed commercial residential development in the commercial area is encouraged to reflect a rhythm and a scale of the street, to use compatible materials, to maintain active storefronts. Whereas discouraged designs tend to break up a street wall with incorrect setback, are oversized, or have incompatible elements, such as reducing transparency on a commercial ground floor, like we see in the red section of this visual. Next slide, please. And while we do provide very specific examples like the last two, we also wanted to show larger scale perspectives like this rendering from our former industrial character zone. The goal here is to show how massing, setbacks, and materials are designed to fit within the context, but also respect views, reinforce industrial character while allowing for adaptive reuse and new investment. And it also shows how responsible density can be encouraged here in our purple diagrams. But with better setbacks from the river, these allow for heightened areas that do not necessarily impact heritage attributes, protect gateway elements, protect views, and protect overall character at the core of Hespeler. Next slide, please. Perfect. So finally, we also want to highlight within this plan the value of the public realm and the natural heritage. For example, the Speed River and its open spaces are central to Hespeler's character. This is something we overwhelmingly heard in our consultation process, and residents and owners have identified this aspect as an example as a key heritage attribute of this place. In this plan, the river is treated as a public-facing frontage, meaning that buildings along it need to be designed with the same care and quality as their street-facing facades. The goal here is to conserve the cultural and the natural value of the river while enhancing it as a shared community space. Development along the riverfront must respect views, scale, and the character of the setting so that the river continues to anchor the identity of the district. Next slide, please. So just in closing, the last couple of slides here, I want to highlight that community consultation has been central to this process and will continue to be. So as Jeremy outlined, we've had multiple public information sessions. We've included more formal sessions, focus groups, surveys, both in person and online, with the goal of ensuring that all voices are heard. Other planning departments have been consulted to make sure the plan is in keeping with Cambridge's other policies. And we've also contacted and received feedback from a variety of additional stakeholders, conservation groups, and so on. We've also presented at MHAC at key stages, and we'll continue to do so. So next slide, please. So looking ahead, as Jeremy articulated, the plan will be presented to the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee later this month, and there'll also be a drop-in open house for the community at the end of October. Early in 2026, the final plan will be presented to both MHAC and to Council, at that point, Council will decide whether to adopt the plan formally and designate the district. Implementation will follow, follow the adoption if it in fact happens, and marks the beginning of a new chapter for conserving Hespeler's heritage. Next slide, please. So thank you again for your attention. The draft plan is still online and we welcome your feedback. We've received some feedback so far from our focus groups, and we hope to get some fulsome feedback after this meeting, after our open house as well, and after from our survey. So we look forward to continuing the conversation and working together to conserve and enhance Hespeler's unique heritage character. So just to the next slide. The last slide, Jeremy's contact information, so everybody knows how to submit their feedback, either in email or written form, if you don't get to it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you. And thank you very much, Emily, for your presentation. It was great. I have a few questions, but I'll just start with one. And I guess following up from the previous delegation, with 241 Queen Street West, now that we've got you here, would you be able to answer that delegation's question as to why that property was included in the HCD as a contributing piece of land?
Sure. I mean, I didn't hear that. I was waiting to be called in, but I can answer this question. And we have been asked this question before. So in our opinion, and through the field research and the research in general, historical research, the study phase, and throughout the plan phase, in addition to all the consultation that we've done, this property met two criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act. These are contextual criteria, and this has been identified multiple times. Primarily its location within the district, adjacent to the Speed River, adjacent to a National Historic Site, at once part of the site that we're referring to, the textile mill right next door. This property holds a significant amount of heritage value from our perspective for the district. This is also a significant gateway property. This will be right at the beginning of the western section of the district, and its adjacency to the Speed River. Once again, I can't emphasize enough how important the river has been to the district in terms of anchoring the district and in terms of the public feedback that we've received. So we feel that this particular property not only meets the Ontario Heritage Act criteria by meeting at least two of the criteria to be considered a contributing property, we also feel that this is an important property presently and an important property going forward in the future of the district.
Thanks, Emily.
Councillor Swery.
Thank you, Chair. Emily, thank you for your presentation. I'm still a little bit confused on contributing and non-contributing properties, because as I'm looking at that one, a map you have where there's the blue and the yellow, you were saying, for example, 241 Queen is the reason it's contributing its location to Speed River next to a heritage site, but then as I'm looking on the map, so are some of the other yellow ones that are on the Speed River beside heritage sites. So I'm a little confused on if you can more clearly explain why those are not and the others are.
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, part of this process was looking into the heritage and the historical background of these particular properties. It is difficult at times to make a case under contextual value alone for a property, especially when we're looking at properties that may be vacant. In certain instances, some of the other properties adjacent to the Speed River are municipal properties as well. They're not residential properties. They're kind of adjacent to the end of certain residential properties by the river. In the case of the property in question, this property had the strongest argument as a vacant waterfront property, given its adjacency to the National Historic Site, given the fact it was originally part of this National Historic Site property, to make a case. In addition to that, it is a gateway property. So coming into the district, this will be the first property from the west that you will encounter. So ensuring that this property does maintain character of the district is very important in our opinion. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add here.
I think that really covers pretty much everything specific to the properties adjacent to the river.
Councillor, oh, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, if I could
Okay.
have a follow-up. I understand 241 Queen, your answer, but my question is also about all the other yellow-colored scattered properties like on the various streets, and they're not all owned, I'm assuming, by the city, where some are contributing and some are non-contributing. It's just confusing because there's one house is, the other one isn't, the other one is.
Of course. Yeah, I'd be happy to go through the additional, each additional property. And when we do complete the plan, every property has a data sheet that articulates why and how each property meets the criteria. So those will be available to the municipality and to property owners once the completion of the plan has reached its finalization. And those I can specifically highlight going into those properties. Right now, I can't, I can go in and pull out the information on each specific one, but really it is making a strong case for each particular property. And I want to articulate again that because of the adjacency to the Speed River, whether a property is contributing or non-contributing, the whole district property, the whole district policies and guidelines will apply to those properties. And much to do with the whole district policies have to do with the adjacency to the river. So in that sense, we didn't want to say, okay, on a non-contributing property, you can do whatever you want. On a contributing property, it's very strict. So the idea here is to look at the district as a whole, but lay the groundwork and work within the framework of the Ontario Heritage Act. So this is the way that we approached, the way we evaluated each of these properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Kempson.
Thank you very much, Chair Mehta, and through you. Thanks, Emily, for your presentation. I have a question about, and I'm going to try to describe the area as best I can. Basically, sort of Queen Street between Cooper Street and Guelph Ave and Adam Street. So that would be, if we're looking from Ernie's along past the area where they have the Hespeler Farmers Market. And I'm specifically wondering, in that area, there's a couple of relatively new developments. There's the condos that are the former American Standard building, and there's the new tower, I guess, that has the Bishop's Brew coffee shop in the main level. I'm sorry, I don't know what the name of it is, but it's across from sort of central area. And then there's also that other development that's going in on the corner of, I think kind of Guelph turns into Adam-ish there. So I guess I'm just wondering, we have some existing buildings that have height, right, sort of smack dab in the middle of the district. And I know you had the one diagram here where you're sort of showing us how the height could potentially blend in. But I guess I'm wondering, do you have sort of specifics for if we want to see more of that kind of infill development, how that's going to work? Greater than like the diagrams here, more so than just like a dwelling or like some row houses with shops below? Are we going to be allowing things like that to continue, or are those ones where we won't be in the future?
So ideally, what we want to see are properties and new development that contribute to the heritage fabric that's been identified, especially in that area, in the commercial area. So in cases like you mentioned, there's been certain instances where, say, a setback or a street access or a height hasn't been what we would consider complementary or protecting of the Hespeler heritage attributes that have been identified. With that being the case, we would like to see development in the future be more sensitive to these aspects. So part of our efforts were to highlight specifically these sections in the commercial area in particular, because that's seen kind of this increase in development interest, not to eliminate any possible chance of development, but really speak to how to make it more sensitive to the existing street wall and to the existing heights that are within the heritage building. So Chris, I think you can probably speak a little bit more into how complementary design, what we would be looking for, and how we'd articulate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Emily. I think you've got a really good start there in terms of responding to the question. I do want to highlight as well, and Jeremy can speak to this more as well, just his awareness of policy and the interaction between them, that the HCD document, in terms of managing infill, height, and those types of design considerations and development considerations, it works together with zoning and the official plan as well. So this is not the only document for managing. It's so there's that point first. In terms of managing height, it's I think the intent of the graphic that was included within the presentation was really to illustrate it's not a question of we can't do it. It's a question of managing it and placing it in locations that sort of lessen the impact or manage the level of change to the district as a whole, so that we can carefully evolve of the district and sort of the sense of place that's present within the core of Hespeler. I think maybe one of the things that was confusing, but maybe something to clarify, like the scale difference between the sort of further away development and then the development within the district core, it was pretty extreme. And the intent there was really to, again, to simplify the example. In practice, what you'll find is there's a lot more nuance to the design in terms of how you best integrate new height within the district. Exactly. So I think, some of the key features within that graphic, you have your step back. So that sort of lowers the scale, but that's still 4 stories. And, there's instances, depending on the size of the property, where you could see, additional height if it's pushed back even farther. And then really just then playing off that rhythm to make sure that that sort of street wall is intact, especially within this sort of commercial core. I think generally what we found along the Queen Street, I believe, was that sort of 2 to 3 story was pretty dominant with the third story often being either solid or more of a mansard style roof, just to gain that extra height with still sort of bringing that scale down. And I think there's the mansard is a really good example of sort of a historic approach to dealing with that additional height as well. So I mean, people could draw inspiration from that. Yeah, so it's less of a question that you can't do it, and it's more of a question that of sort of where and it's where and how. And yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll mention before I stop is integrating a height is tricky with an Hespeler, and one of the main drivers for that is just the topography of downtown. And that one of the things that we included within the plan was key views. So the key views will also play a role in terms of where where it's best to place the height, because if you're coming across the bridge, right, your sense of one of the corners that you described is kind of, it's like, whoa, but if you're coming from the other direction, it's like it's not so bad. So just being mindful of how you perceive the height is also important.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you. And thanks again, Emily and Chris, for answering our questions. I was just wondering, and maybe this is a question for staff, but what happens to existing projects that are already working their way through the city's planning process? So some of those that may have already begun going through their drafts, they may have come to council before, they might be coming up with their designs. Are they grandfathered in, or do we turn to those existing projects and say, sorry, we've got to go with the guidelines in the HCD, you've got to revise this? Like, is there a way to ensure that existing projects that have started this process with the city aren't penalized if an HCD comes to fruition?
Jeremy, I think I'm going to lean on you on this one. We'd like to see projects meet the criteria of the HCD, but I feel, or Melissa, okay, great. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Through the chair. With existing development applications that are already received by the city and in process, new regulations would not apply. So it would only be applications after the HCD comes into effect where the HCD plan would be used as guidance.
Thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for a fine job that they've done. Okay, and I'm going to give you a kind of a bit of a history lesson and a few sad stories. I'm from Hespeler, grew up there, lived there all my life. Okay, and I've seen some pretty crappy things done in my younger years. Hespeler at one point had a very vibrant downtown, all kinds of shops, but then, the Zehrs and the friggin' all the big stores got there, and the loyal people of Hespeler migrated elsewhere to do their shopping. But there was a whole city block taken down at one point. It had about 10, 12, 14 shops on it. It's referred to as the Colonnade, and that's where the apartments are there that are 2 stories with parking in the middle. And then American Standard, they made bathtubs and sinks, et cetera, et cetera. They went out of business. The property was sold, purchased by a developer, changed hands a few times. In the old American Standard building, put in some beautiful condominiums, lovely condominiums. But there was additional property there where the steel barn was. And that steel barn was torn down, and lo and behold, we now have an 11-story building on Queen Street in Hespeler. Beautiful when you walk in, but it really doesn't fit. So I want to thank you folks for what you're doing, okay? And we can say that this is not right, that's not right, but I believe this is to be a start of what's going to be a lovely area of our city. And as a council, we have to push this. It's a good area. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but Highway 24 used to go right through Hespeler at one point, and it was a nut that was crazy on the weekends, all right, until the bypass was put in. But again, downtown Hespeler was vibrant with stores and shops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then along came the shopping malls, and the loyal people of Hespeler, like every other small community, went to the malls. but I think you're doing a great job, and you've got some criticism here. I'm not sure it's justified, but please keep up the good work and keep pushing. Thank you.
Mayor Jan?
Thank you. Yes, I'm in full support of this, but I do have a question with regard to the Speed River. You keep saying that it's part of the Grand we all know that the Grand is a designated national heritage river, but so is the Speed. So the tributaries are also part of that designation under the Grand strategy, and I know that because I was on the GRCA committee for 2 of those 10-year monitoring reports, so I'm very knowledgeable about that stuff, but I'm not seeing that in this document, that the Speed is also part of that designation. So, to strengthen this case, I think you need to say that it actually is designated along with the Grand and the other tributaries.
Sure, absolutely. It was something that we did during the study phase. It was certainly something that we did mention, and it was something that we are aware of. So we certainly can ensure that it's in this document as well, so that this document has that additional sort of layer represented, especially in the policy section, just as a reinforcement of its significance. Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions? We have no more questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move ahead and put the motion on the floor. Councillor Swery, you have the motion.
Thank you, Chair Mehta. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Devine, that report 25-015-PG Hespeler Heritage Conservation District Plan Public Meeting be received.
Thank you. Does council have any further questions for staff? If you have comments, I will allow that to Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you, I have a question for staff. Would someone, possibly one of our heritage staff, be able to explain the difference between the requirements under a heritage impact assessment versus an HCD? Because I know we had heard that from our delegate, saying that they would have to comply with a HIA, and so I just want to know what would be the difference in terms of the implications on the design. Thank you.
Yes. All right, thank you very much for the question. So the heritage permit process is under the Heritage Act, whereas the heritage impact assessment would be under a Planning Act. It would be triggered under a Planning Act application. So the case, I guess, that the delegate had made would be that because it's adjacent to the district and it's adjacent to a Part 4 designated property, that we would have a trigger in our official plan to ask for an HIA as part of any development of that site. And that is true. Staff's position, however, is that the heritage permit process is much stronger to be able to enforce heritage-related conditions for things like design, building design, views, sight lines, any sort of related to the building and how it fits with the character of the area and the character of the district. Whereas with the heritage impact assessment, we can ask for the study. The study will assess the impacts on the adjacent district or the adjacent Part 4 designated property, but enforcing the recommendations within the heritage impact assessment is not the same as the heritage permit process. It's we have to do that through the Planning Act process and through the zoning bylaw as well. So it's a slightly more streamlined process in a sense, an easier process to ensure that we can make sure that heritage conditions are respected if it's designated.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and through you. This is probably actually another question for Jeremy, so you might want to stay up there. Sorry. On page 91, I know it talks about in the whole district facet of the HCD that any new development shall be visually and physically compatible with the cultural heritage values of the district. And I always remember the quote I heard, which was, "You can't regulate style." So how do we determine that something is exactly or close to physically and visually compatible with a cultural heritage value? Like, how do we actually determine that as a city?
That's a great question. Through the chair. There's policies and guidelines in the district plan. So policies are more direct about what shall happen, what really should happen in the district in terms of additions, new development. The guidelines are a little bit more flexible in terms of things that could happen or good design in the district. So we would be guided by both the policies and the guidelines. And part of it is looking at what are the architectural styles in the area, what is appropriate in terms of the size of an addition, the location of an addition. So the plan does kind of go through a lot of that in terms of the visuals that are provided. But at the end of the day, it's a decision that staff and ultimately council will make with the advice of the Heritage Committee based on the guidance of the plan.
Councillor Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Are we on comments now? Can we be?
We're kind of focusing more on questions, but if you have a comment, I'll take it.
Okay. I just want to say thank you for an incredible report here. This has given me a lot of faith in the protection of what's brought a lot of people here. I have a soft spot in my heart for Hesper, actually. When I first came from England in '88, I spent many years over in the Fisher Mills area. And my family, like many other thousands that have come here across this city, have come here from other larger places because of this fantastic heritage, the charm that we see in downtown Hesper. We also see in Preston, we see it in Galt. And I think it's imperative that we do whatever we can to maintain that, to maintain the charm, the beauty of what brought a lot of people here, including myself. Once it's gone forever. And when I see this report and I see the protection we're going to give it, I have a lot of faith. I'm very happy about what I've seen here. So to everyone involved, thank you.
Councillor Swery.
Thank you, Chair Mehta, and this is, again, probably for Jeremy. A question. On page 98, there's a section, traffic management. And now, like you were saying, that high volume of traffic, that's not within your scope to regulate traffic. However, it is within your scope to determine road width and traffic calming devices, et cetera, is what it says. So this my concern here, but of course then if you do, you have to consider the landscape, the loss of green space. So as we're pushing for intensification in this area, the roads are very narrow. How are you gonna match the two you want? There's gonna be probably more build, but how would you match the fact that these roads would need, like Queen Street or Guelph, would need to be widened?
Okay, through the chair, that's another great question. So the intent of the plan is to maintain the character of those roadscapes and streetscapes where they've been identified as being important from a heritage perspective. I might actually pass it on to Emily and to Chris for that specific question on the roads, because I don't have the plan in front of me in terms of what you're referring to. I think you said page 98, where it's talking about road widths. So Emily, I don't know if you're able to jump in on that in terms of that section of the plan.
Sorry, just give me one sec. I'm going to pull up. I was hoping I had it, but I can speak. So the idea behind providing guidance in terms of traffic calming or in terms of any sort of aesthetic issues that arise that may affect the heritage attributes of the area is simply to have a say when it comes to the heritage context when infrastructure projects do have to happen. Heritage is intended to work in line with other planning departments when it comes to major structural aspects, but if in terms of sustainable development and development that has to happen within Hespeler or proposed development, one of the considerations obviously is traffic management. And as through heritage, you can't say that you can't, the point is to ensure that everything is done in a sensitive manner. So if it's, if road widening has to happen, if there's an affected green space, anything that is done to replace that, anything that is done to mediate that, will also have a sensitivity to either what was already there, what is adjacent to it, or if this particular area is an important gateway. So when going through the process of these major projects, heritage will be a group that will be considered in the design going forward. So it's not saying you can't do these things, it's just saying these things have to work within reason, within sensitivity to these attributes. But certainly one of the advantages of this stage is to go through the, with the feedback, go through the plan, make sure that everything is, as clear as possible and articulated as well as possible so that there is no confusion. So certainly we'll be happy to go back into that section and just to make sure that it's articulated in the best way possible.
Thank you.
I just wanted to highlight one other thing as well. It's the street, that especially for an area such as the commercial core, it's a critical piece of defining what makes that, like, just gives it a sense of place. I guess an analogy in the case of a district, the street can be a little bit like a door, like an entry to a building. I think one of the things that is woven throughout the HCD plan, and which is kind of necessary for an HCD of this scale, is an attention to the relationship between buildings and the streetscape and the larger natural landscapes. Just a real emphasis on how it feels to be in these spaces, and the streetscapes being on the sidewalk. Again, depending on the areas, it's a pretty critical part of how you experience that.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, the chair. Just on the traffic. Councillor Shuri and I have had more complaints this year about traffic. I can only speak for my past. Ms. Shuri's probably not had as many complaints as I have had over the years. Been here a little bit longer. But what's happened this year, it's been very unique. It's been very unique because sections of Queen Street were closed. Guelph Avenue was, there was a little bit of construction there, but not so much as Fisher Mill Road. At the end of Fisher Mill Road, they got the roundabout tore up, right? And on, right by the post office, with the old Hesper post office, I mean, that road's tore up too. So it's like the perfect storm for traffic. All right, so we've probably had more complaints in the last 4 or 5 months about traffic and shake a stick at. And the roundabout's not going to be done quick on Highway 24, but we also got to remember too, folks, all right, I mean, the world has changed. Highway 24 used to be Queen Street and Hesper. No longer, thank goodness. Okay, the bypass was put in, but I mean, the traffic's going to be bad up until this fall. And until they get arterial roads built out that section of the city, when there's development out there, the traffic's not going to get any better, I don't think. To be honest with you, it will clear up because when the construction's done, but I don't.
Are there any other comments, direction? I see none. I just wanted to say, though, from my perspective, this is a very refreshing document, very solid plan. I'm quite excited by it. And these kind of policies are needed to preserve the character of the city. And without them, we'll just start to look like any other city. So I'm quite excited that this will create a great sense of place. And these neighborhoods too, and these plans are often the more sought-after neighborhoods in many cities as well, and tourists like to go there and that as well. So it's exciting. So thank you for your hard work. So we're going to declare this meeting closed. Oh wait, we got to do the vote first. I got ahead of myself. Sorry. Yeah.
Am I going to do it?
Yeah. We'll call the vote now.
Opening voting. Closing voting. And that carries.
And I now declare this public meeting closed. I get to do a second time. There you go. So we'll move on to a motion to receive. Could I have the mover read the motion? Councilor Devine?
Is this on? Recommendations that the presentations correspondence from the October 17, 2025 Planning Statutory Public Meeting be received.
Thank you. I'll call the vote.
Opening voting. And closing voting. And that carries.
And we have now reached the end of our meeting. Could I have the mover read the motion? Councilor Kimpson.
Thank you very much, Chair Ameta, through you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Hamilton, recommendation that the Planning Statutory Public Meeting Committee does now adjourn at 7:54 p.m.
Thank you. We'll call the vote.
Opening voting. And closing voting. And that carries.
Well, thank you to everyone for taking the time to contribute your thoughts during our meeting, and have a great evening.